Welcome to MagicQ PC, Part 7, Recording Cues. Make sure, as I mentioned in my other videos, that you've gone through these tutorials in a sequence so that you have things prepared. They do follow in sequence where you're adding things, and the tutorial will make a lot more sense that way. Alright, so we're going to talk about recording cues in this tutorial. First of all, again, I want to set up some custom windows. If you remember in our other tutorials, I'm going to hold down my control key on my keyboard. We have some custom windows. We did palettes, we did a patch window, we did an intensity window where we had groups on this side and intensity on this side, and then we did a programmer window. Alright, so first of all, we're going to set up a special window here where we're going to be able to look at what the lights are actually doing in a performance, and I think it makes it a lot easier. This program does come with a visualizer, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I found what I've done here to be a lot more useful. It's kind of a grid setup. So let's get to that. I'm going to just close up my programmer window. We're going to go to plot over here. Click on plot. If you remember when we started patching lights, the program asked us if we wanted to insert the lights into the visualizer. And I said yes. So here's what we have. All of our light fixtures have been inserted into the visualizer. But we need to arrange them because they're not where they need to be on stage. So that's what we're going to do. You'll want to go up here and click on View Design. So basically we'll be in design mode. So here's my incandescents, 1 through 10. Here are my DMX color changers. Here's my lighting strips, and here's my 2 moving lights. So first of all, I need to have my incandescents up near the front because that's the way my stage is set up. So I'm going to click, hold, and drag a square around these, select these couple lights, and now I can just take them and get them out of the way over here. Going to do the same thing for these. Going to click, hold, drag over the top, move these back here, and same thing, I'm going to take my movers and just move them aside over here for the time being. Alright, my 5 incandescent lights 1 through 5, I want these down at the front of the stage, so they're actually going to be pointing back the other way. But I just prefer this lighting setup, so that to me this is going to be the front, and to me this is going to be the back here. I'm not going to take the time to rotate them right now. I'm just going to leave them in this position. Then I'm going to click and drag to select my next incandescents, and these are going to be back on the next electric back here somewhere. Okay. My 2 movers are going to be up front here on this electric, but I'm going to set them, slightly offset them so we can see them in the grid. So again, I can click and drag around them and just kind of move them over to here, drop them in here somewhere. And same thing, my color changers are going to be on the same electric with my incandescents here, but I'm just going to put them slightly offset, like over in this direction, so they kind of appear in between these lights. And then finally, my strip lights are going to be pretty much at the back of the stage back here. So I'll just put them back here. So we've kind of set up things the way they want them to be. Now I'm going to go to my output window over here and click on out. And output has a couple different views to it. We can look at the heads and it will tell us. So when we're actually running cues and sending signals out, we can look at heads and it'll tell us our percentage. We can look at channels and it will tell us our percentage of each of the lights. And we can do a view plan here, which we're going to go to view plan. I'm going to set the grid size. I want the grid size to be 10 spots across. So basically setting up a grid 10 spots across by 8 spots back. So it will do a grid like this, and I'll just simply say yes. Now I can just go up here and click on insert heads into the grid. Insert heads in which direction, and I'm going to just say horizontal, and then it will put them in there. Now I have to move some of them around because they're not exactly where I like them to be. So I'm going to just grab, I'm in this view grid and view plan, and I'm going to select drag move so I can grab my lights and put them where I would like them to be. So light 1 I'm going to put down here. Light 2 I'm going to leave a little space, put that in here. Fixture 3, I'll leave 2 spaces here, 4, and then 5. Alright, and then I'm going to leave some space here for our 2 movers. which is 28 and 29. Actually, I can drag them into position now too. So I'm going to put 28 in here and 29 in here. So they're kind of on the opposite sides of one another up in the front. Then we'll do our next incandescence. We're going to do 6. We'll put 6 here, 7, kind of the same positioning as I did for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, and 10. Those lights are there, those fixtures are there. Then I'm going to do my color changer, so I'll do 21, put 21 in here, put 22 in here, put 23 here, and put 24 there. Those are my color changers. These are my strip lights that are at the back. So move light 25 and put that up here, leave 2 spaces, put light 26 here, leave 2 spaces, and put strip light 27 there. So strip light 25, 2 spaces, 26, 2 spaces, and 27. Actually, it left 3 spaces in here between that one, those two. Actually, I could do this. I'll just move this over, make it a little more even across the back. Okay? Now I'm going to click outside of here and deselect all, so that deselects them all. So we've got these kind of a grid in position for us here, and you'll see how this is going to work. Now, as far as this output window goes, I would like this to be just basically on the left-hand side of my screen. Now I've got my lights positioned, so I'm going to go to my view and say left. So that is now over on the left. Now behind there we had let the stage plot up. We can close that and get rid of that. Now I'm going to open up my cue stack. So I'm going to go over here and say cue stack. This one I would like to be on the right hand side of the screen, so I'm going to say view right. So now I've kind of got a grid showing me what my lights are going to do on this side, and I've got my cue stack, my running cues over here. So as I progress through my cues, I can actually see what's happening to the lights. And we'll just do one here. I'm going to start up this and you'll get the idea what's going on. Okay, kind of cool, right? So we can actually see here's our incandescents, here's our 2 movers, here's our incandescents, there's our color changers, and here's our strip lights across the back. So you get the idea now why I want to do this kind of a setup, because as I'm running my cues, I can glance over there quickly, and I can quickly identify if there's any issues, if something isn't looking the way I had originally planned it to be in the cue. Okay, so our cue is up, and you can see the lights are on over here and determine which ones. Now, 1 or 2 more things I want to do here before we save this window setup. Click on the top of the outputs window, make sure you have this, and deselect, drag, move, because we're done moving lights around and placing them on the grid where we like to see them. And now, the view that we see here, right now it's just giving us head numbers, and we can do a view type, decide what gets displayed. So click on view type, and we're going to select head numbers and intensity. So now it's going to show me the head number and the intensity. So for this color changer number 21 here, we have it's at full. And for this incandescent light, light number 6, or fixture number 6, it's at 50%. I like that particular setup, so that's what we're going to stick with. One last thing we're going to do, we're going to release this playback. So the way you release a playback is make sure you have it selected so it'll have a blue border at the top. And you can select them playbacks by either pressing the S key, or in the MagicQ PC version, all you have to do is click right in the playback window. Select the playback and then click on release. That playback is now released. I'm just going to drop the fader down. So we have this window set up the way that we want it to be. So I'm going to save that. So if you remember the procedure for doing that, you come down here, you click on record. Then I'm going to hold down my control key on my keyboard and click up here. Now it's going to call it layout 5, so we could leave it layout 5, but I'm going to rename that. So I'm going to click on set, hold down my control key, click up here, keyboard comes up, I'm going to type run show and hit return. So now when I look, this is going to be my run show setup. You know, there's intensity, there's program, there's my run show setup. So when I'm running my show, this is the window setup that I would like to see, with lights and intensities indicated over here, and with my cues indicated over here. Now, one more setup that I would like to do is a cue stack window, because we're going to be using that during this tutorial also. So let me just close these two windows by clicking on the X's. I'm going to go over here and click on cue stack. I would like the cue stack in this window to be full, so I'm going to say in view maximum. So we're going to see it all the way across the screen. That will not affect what we did in saving the other window. So we can have two windows, one with a cue stack on the right side and then one with a cue stack that's full screen. And you're going to see why I want to do it that way as we're going through here. So we're going to save this window also. I'm going to say record, hold down my control key, click my empty soft button up here, and it says layout 6. Let's go ahead and name that. Click on set, hold down control, click there, call this cue stack, and hit return. So now I have my run show window I created with my intensity or outputs window here, my smaller version of the cue stack over here, and then I have my cue stack window, which is the full version of the cue stacks over here. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and program some more cues. So I'm going to go to my intensity window. I want to do the first set in the show, or the first scene, and this is actually going to be pre-show. So I'm going to do my color dash par hexes at about, let's say about 50%. And again, I could type them in. I'm just using my encoder. I'm going to want them in blue, so I'm going to go to my palettes. I'm going to select blue. Don't forget to open the shutter on these lights or you won't get any light from them. So they're in there. Let's go back to our intensity page again. I would like my color band, my strip lights at the back of the stage. Remember, they don't have an intensity, so I'm just going to go right to the palettes window, and I would like them to be blue also, blue at 100%. So all this information should be in the programmer. You see that the clear button's lit up. Let's check the programmer window, see if they're in there. We can see that the color bands are in blue and the color dash par hexes are in at blue at 50%. That's pretty much all I want. So I'm going to just click on record and click down here. So now you can see that this is called cue stack 1. That's what the CS1 stands for. It's playback 9. There are currently 2 cues in this playback, and we have a Q1 and Q2. Let's do something here. Let's go to our cue stack window. So here we have a little bit more information about the cue. Let's fix this up for a minute. I do want this Q2 that I just created to actually be the first cue in the show so that it's blue. So what I can do is we'll just renumber here a little bit. I'm going to double click in here and call this Q3, and then it asks us that do we want to move the cue in the cue stack. I'm going to say yes. So now it flipped them, so that cue is actually down here, and this is our blue cue up here. I'm going to double click this one and just call this Q1, and then we can renumber this guy to Q2. So it's easy to renumber cues. You just simply double click in the QID box and then type that. Now, notice over here that the program has also given a label to these. This one's called Q2 and this is called Q1. That doesn't match with what we had here. That's because this was the first cue we recorded. This was the second cue we recorded. What I probably should have done to start out with, to avoid some confusion, was given it a name or some text. So let me double click in here and then type blue stage. And then hit enter. So now it says blue stage, and it's actually added it over here to the cue description. So Q2, which was the second cue we recorded, is blue stage. But as far as the way we're going to play back these cues, this is actually going to be the first cue. Hopefully that's not too confusing. Let's double click here, and we'll call this scene 1. And then hit return. So now we have scene 1. So we have our blue stage to start and then our C1. Okay, one of the things you want to make sure you do is after you've done recording the cue, unless you're going to use a similar lighting setup, make sure that you hit clear to get all of that information out of the programmer so there's no information in the programmer. I'm going to program another cue here, a third cue. I want this one to be a little dimmer than the scene 1, so I'm going to go to my intensity. I can either select the lights here by clicking on them. I'll get all my front of house, my electric 1. I'm going to do these at about 20%. So I'll use my encoder over here. I'm going to do my color par dashes over here. Set these at about 50%. Okay, again, I can type at 5, enter if I want to get it exactly at 50. You can use a combination of that. And color-wise, let's go to palettes. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different in here. I'm going to go to my colors, but I'm going to do my color picker. So rather than selecting something that's here, I'm going to select color picker, and this comes up. So now I can take my value here and move around and select a color anywhere in this range, and it will try to figure out what my values should be on my red, green, blue, amber, white, and ultraviolet on this particular fixture to make it look the way I want it. To make it even simpler, I'm going to click on View Gels, and I'm going to look at my gel choices, and I would want this to be something like maybe in the salmon range. So I'm going to click on salmon, and that'll set this salmon color for me. So when I go back and I look at this in my palettes, in my colors, look at what it's done. It set red at a value, green at a value, white at a value, amber at a value. So this is what it's thinking that it could do as a value to give me that salmon color that I want as far as the lights are concerned. Let's do the same thing with the back lights here. So I can even select my color bands from here. I can do view heads, and I can do color band, color band, color band. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to select color picker and then view gels, and then say the same thing then for them, salmon. If I go back and look at my palettes again in the color range here, so it's tried to do the same thing with the strip lights in the back to give them a value so they look correct. And I think we better go, I think we missed something here that I better make sure I do. We didn't do an open beam. Let me do view heads. Our color dash pars, we forgot to do shutter open. So let's take a look at the programmer so far, what we have. Color dash pars, those are the values to create that salmon color. The shutter is open. Our front of house lights are here, set at 20%, and our strip lights are at the back, and they're set for that salmon color too. Now I'm just going to say record, and again click down here. So once we record this, this goes purple. I'm going to clear it out so there's nothing in the programmer. Going to take a look, hold down Control, click Q stack. So now we can see that we have 3 cues in here. Here's the cue we just created. I'm going to double click here and call it scene 3. Enter, so we've got that, and it says Q3 here, scene 3. So this was the 3rd cue that we've created while we've been working on this particular show. And you have the information. Now let's do, at this point in the show, I need to have a blackout happen. So we're going to go back and we're going to program a blackout. So let's go to intensity. And just to make sure, I'm going to select my lights, my front of house, and I can actually do my colored par hexes and say at 0, enter. And the reason I wanted to do that is to get these to light up at 0% so they actually go in the programmer. So when we look, we have those lights into the programmer and they're set at 0. So we're going to, as we progress from the previous cue, we're actually going to make sure that these lights get reset. The intensity levels get set down to 0. Now we need to take a look at, let's take a look at that intensity. The color bands, remember, these guys here don't have an intensity, so I have to do something a little different. I'm going to go over to my palettes window, and I'm just going to make sure that these are all shut down. So I'm going to make sure red's at 0, green's at 0, blues at 0. Notice I'm clicking in here. Remember, this goes like 0, 50, or 150, 0. So I can quickly click in these and make sure that everything's going to go to 0. So those are also zeroed out. We really don't need to make sure that the shutter is open on the other one. So let's take a look at the programmer again. So it looks like we got everything. Everything's at 0%. Our strip lights in the back are at 0, so that means that those will go off and they won't be visible. So again, we say record and we click down here. So we've added that. The values go purple. I say clear to release those out of there. Let's take a look at our cue stack. What we've got now, we've got 4 cues. I'll double click in here and say blackout. And there we go. Blackout cues is recorded in there. So I'm going to put a new scene in here. Let's go to view intensities. All right, let's do our front of houses and our electric ones. This is going to be very bright, this scene, very nice and bright. So I'm going to say at 70%. So those are up at 70%. I'm going to do my color dash pars at full. And I'm going to do these in that salmon color again. So I'm going to go to palettes. I'm going to click here, go to color picker, go to gels, and select the salmon color again. Go back to my palettes, make sure that the shutters are open for those lights. Select up here, say view heads. Do my color band lights in the back. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll go to color. We'll go to color picker, view gels. We'll do the salmon color for those. So those are all in. And now we're also going to go, I'm going to back intensity. I'm going to select my Rogue One beams. And I'm going to do these guys at full also. So the Rogue Ones are in at full. Looks like it didn't pick up our intensity for the color dash par hexes. So let's make sure that we do those and get those in at full. Okay, so those are up at full and selected. Let me go back to my Rogue One beams. We'll go back to our palettes window here. Now, these lights you cannot program with gels because remember this particular light has a color wheel in it. So we can't do the color picker element with this. We're going to have to just get something that's close color wise. So I'm going to think that maybe my pink color is going to be a good color to go with. I'm going to say shutter open, so that's open. And then I'm just going to do center as far as position goes. Again, what I could do is I can go to the position window and use my X and my Y encoders to move those lights around where they want them to be. And I'll probably do a separate tutorial on how to do the moving lights, but we'll just for the time being select one of these values. Let's take a look at our programmer, see if everything looks like it's correct. So we got our front of house and electric lights and electric ones in at 70. Our Rogue Ones are dimmer up all the way, center position pink, and shutter is open on those. Our color dash pars are in with shutter open, and our strip lights are on in the back. So let's say record, and I'll click here, and notice they go to purple. I'll clear them out so they're no longer in the programmer. Let's take a look at our cue stack, Q5. I'm going to call this scene 4. And hit return. So now we've got basically 5 cues in there. And we can take a look and we can run these now. So I'm going to go to our run show. Again, I'm just kind of bopping around now, but remember, anytime you want to look at your soft keys up here, you have to hold down the control key, and then those soft keys pop up. So I held down control key and clicked on run show, and these windows pop up. All right, I have my cue stack 1 here, playback 9 selected, and there's my cues here kind of in miniature, so I can see my cue ID, my text, and some other information about the cue over here. I'm going to raise my fader so I actually have lights on the stage, and click playback. So here we come up. If you remember, that was the blue stage cue. Let's go for next. Now we're bringing up some lights. Now you'll notice something peculiar probably as this was coming up, that the 2 Rogue Ones, as they were coming in and they were filling in here, that the color wheel was actually going through different colors as it was spinning through there. And that's why you saw this changing colors. And we're going to show you how to fix that in a minute. All right, let's go on to the next cue. This cue did not include the Rogue One, so that they go out. This one was a little bit dimmer and then some different colors back here. This is a blackout. And then this is our Q5, which was scene 4. Okay, a couple of issues with this, and we have to fix some. Now the easiest way to fix them, and again, I'm just going to go release in here. and bring my fader back down. Let's go to the cue stack so we can see these cues better. So first thing that I notice is this blackout. I want this to be immediate. The program defaults to fading everything in at 3 seconds. Easy way to fix that, we're going to take this cue, the blackout cue, double click in the fade column and give it a new fade time of 0, enter. So now that cue is going to fade in and out at 0. All right. Our blue stage is a slow fade up. I may want this to fade up even slower. This is like pre-show. I can double click up here and say 5, and that's 5 seconds. My scene 1 is good for me. That's 3 seconds. All right, I want to do something special with this scene 3 cue here. I would like the lights to fade out quicker and the new scene to fade in slowly. So we're going to do what we call a split cue, where the lights that are currently on that may be fading downwards to a different value are going to fade downwards quickly, and any lights that are coming up to a new value are going to be coming up slowly. So I'm going to say, I'm double click here and say, I want it to come up slowly, so I want it to fade up in 5, but I would like it to fade down in 2, and then click enter. So that's what we call a split value, and you'll actually see that happening. And then finally, we'll leave this one the way it is. Let's take a look at how this is going to affect how the cue runs. Let's go to our run show. I'll raise my fader and I'll click go. So notice that we're counting in here. This is a 5-second fade in, so it came up in 5. Now our next cue is going to fade in 3 when I click go. So that's fading in 3, and then it says it's completed. Okay. Our next cue is going to be the split. So it's going to take a long time to fade up, 5 seconds to fade up, but 2 to fade out. Let's see what this looks like. Okay. Now, actually what happened here, since all of my lights were involved, there wasn't anything new fading in, so we didn't see any changes in that. But we could do something where it's actually going to be a change where something is fading up. Let's go to our next cue here, which is our blackout. Now we fixed this, so it should go to blackout immediately. And there we go to blackout, and then we have our scene 4. And that comes up in scene 4. I'm going to click release the playback, lights go out on stage, slide this down.